Today on the podcast, we have an interview with Jim Dezzuti and Tom Schemberger, who will talk to us about Our Place, a new adult day center opening up here in Loudon County. Welcome to the Central Conversations podcast. We have two special guests with us today on the podcast. I've gotten to know Jim Dezzuti and Tom Schemberger because of Our Place, which is a new adult daycare center for people who suffer with dementia or Alzheimer's. I want to tell you a little bit about our two guests today. Jim has spent 23 years serving our country in the Army and as a retired lieutenant colonel. He worked for various national retail chains throughout the U.S. in senior leadership positions, and he has lived in Tennessee for about 20 years. He worked for Profits. Some of you might remember Profits department stores, which later became Belk, and he managed the stores in Tennessee. After that challenge, he worked for Burke's Outlet, where he managed and opened 56 stores in a 4-state area, and he's been retired 3 years for the past 3 years. So I'm excited to have Jim here. And I want to introduce Tom Schemberger. Tom grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and his career centered around real estate development and in investments. Tom and his wife Sue retired to Loudon County about 17 years ago. They're very active in their church, Shepherd of the Lake Lutheran Church, where they are charter members. And Tom is also currently serving as the church council president of Shepherd of the Lake Lutheran Church. So welcome, Jim and Tom, to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Nice to be here.
Well, I'm glad we can meet through this technology and everybody can hear your stories. So, Jim, I'm going to start with you. If I left out anything about yourself, why don't you tell everybody about that, and then specifically how you got connected to Our Place?
All right. Well, thank you, Pastor Scott. I think that you pretty well covered my background and what I've done in life. And, thank you very much for that. When it comes to Our Place, it's pretty interesting. It's amazing how you can move through life and things can be out there in front of you and you never really see them because you get so caught up in what you're doing day to day. And it's just amazing how many people in my past, when I thought back about Alzheimer's and dementia, were impacted by that. I never heard of Our Place until about February of last year. And my church pastor came over to my house, rang the doorbell, and I opened it, a little surprised to see him standing there. And he came in, and during the course of our conversation, he asked me if I would help him establish the biggest fair that Loudon County ever saw in recognition and support of Our Place. And first I had asked him what Our Place was, and he explained that it was going to be an adult day service for people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And of course, when your pastor comes to your house and knocks on your door, it's very hard to say no. So I told him I would help him and started going to their meetings. I met a lady named Sue Newman, who was the founder of Our Place, and her husband did have Alzheimer's and dementia and passed away last year. But got to know Sue sitting in those meetings about the fair and the planning that we were doing. At that point, they had just been designated a 501c3, and we're now getting ready to do some fundraising and marketing, which is, I guess, where I came in, even though that's not really my background and expertise. But, Sue and I talked quite a bit. Charlie and I had quite a few meetings. That's my pastor. And we, right about the time we thought we had everything locked down, the real lockdown hit, and that was COVID. And all of a sudden, the fair became something we could no longer do. So we knew we needed to raise money for Our Place. And my pastor came up with the idea of going on a 7,000-mile motorcycle ride to raise the awareness for Alzheimer's and dementia and raise funds for Our Place. So we started planning that. Unbeknown to me, our chairperson stepped down, our vice chairperson stepped down, and I was elected into the position. And that happened around June. In August, Charlie went on his motorcycle ride, and it was a tremendous success. We ended up raising $106,000. That was our initial fundraiser for our place, and just spectacular support from the community. And about the same time, Sue started to have some health problems, and she made a life decision to move closer to her daughters. And the next thing I know, I'm running our place. So that happened back in September, and we've been moving ahead ever since. But it's just been really great from a standpoint of the amount of community response that we received and support and help, and just my own knowledge and learning of Alzheimer's and dementia. Like I started out saying, something I knew very little about, and now probably know more than I would ever know if it weren't for this experience.
Wow.
So that's pretty much my story as it relates to getting to know our place.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Jim, just in terms of you know, why did you say yes when your pastor knocked on the door? I mean, and how has this kind of impacted you and changed you since you've been not just increased knowledge, but kind of why'd you say yes?
Well, it's interesting. I've always been somebody who enjoyed helping people. And, even in the military, I once got in trouble for loading my troops in a 2.5-ton truck during a military exercise and take them in for their college courses because I had encouraged them to better themselves. And in retailing, I did a lot of work with the United Way. And at one point in Pittsburgh, I actually led the effort for our corporation, and we raised about $3 million that year. Which was way beyond the goal that we had established for ourselves. So I'd probably been looking for a couple of years of something that would be really worthwhile for me to get involved with as being part of the newly retired community here in Loudon County. And this just seemed like God calling me and saying that this is what he wanted me to do. And I think he's been my guide through this from the standpoint that things seem to be falling into place. So there's a definite need out there, and I guess God put me in the right place at the right time to lead this effort. And people like Tom have come on board to help, which has been a blessing.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, that's awesome. And one of the things I love about the community in which we live is a lot of people, express their faith in community service, and trying to make their community better and help meet the needs of people. So, Tom, let's bring you in here. Tell how you got connected to our place.
Well, it was through our church as well. It happens that we have a rather small congregation. Typically, our numbers are just slightly over 100 congregants, and we've been around for about 10 years. And what I'd been noticing, because we have the elderly population, with mostly retirees, all of a sudden we were taking note that out of these numbers of folks, there were 3 or 4 or 5 at any given time who were developing Alzheimer's or dementia. And that just shocked me. And it was really a shame because you saw these vital people who had made such a contribution all of a sudden just not being able to handle with day-to-day activities. And it was very discouraging. And, to have 5% of your population involved in it, we've got a congregation where 80% of our congregation truly knows 80% of our congregation. So we really were a family, and this was happening to our family. And the fellows and the gals would get together, and we would take our friends with dementia out for a little break, take them for a car ride. We'd go and get a burger at Burgers, or just go for a walk with them, sit down with them and play Sudoku. And when we would do this, they really reacted positively to it. And the caregiver not only getting a little break, but the caregiver also said when he came home, he was a different person for a while. It was really something that helped a lot. And he'd talk about it. Personally, what I was finding is that these folks hadn't lost it all, that their long-term memory was really still there. And you could talk to them about where they lived, how did they meet their spouse, where are the kids, those kinds of things, the long-term things they could remember. The short-term things would go more quickly. At any rate, all of a sudden we realized that this is something that's not going to go away, and um, and so we just kept doing what we could do. Well, about a year and a half ago, Sue Newman, whose husband had suffered and consequently passed away from Alzheimer's, came to our church one day with the idea she had of creating this adult day center called Our Place. And she told her story. And I guess it really hit home. That story was when her husband developed it, caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's is entirely different than other caregiving. If you have someone with another malady, oftentimes it means making sure that they're toileted, making sure they get up in the morning, getting them bathed, getting them dressed, getting them fed. But then you've got some time to kind of download and take it a little easier or go and do normal things with them. With dementia and Alzheimer's, it's not that at all. Sue told us an example where one day she went out to the mailbox to get the mail, and she got distracted by a neighbor and was gone for about 15 minutes. And she came back into the house, and her husband was standing facing the stove in the kitchen, and the stove was on fire, and he was totally bewildered. She would talk about the fact that her husband would often, wander at night, so she'd have to tie a ribbon around her wrist and around his wrist, so if he left in the middle of the night, she'd be woken to take care of him. So the caregiver really never gets a break. It would be like taking care of a 2-year-old. And when our congregation heard this, the congregation just exploded with wanting to be involved in Our Place, an area that would serve not only our little area, but the counties of all of Loudon County and all of Monroe County. And when we heard it was patterned to have an existing facility up in Farragut, and got to contact and talk with those people and find out how it impacted the people that attended and the caregivers, we just thought this is something we have to make happen. So that's how we got involved.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how was the name derived?
Jim, do you have?
Well, I think it was Sue and her group of like-minded people at that time when they were sitting around wanted something that would hit home. And the name Our Place came to mind because it really is our place. It's our opportunity to help those in our community that need that help and give that respite that's out there. So I think it really was as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I assume it's, just that it's open for everybody. I'm curious, some people watching this know more than others about dementia and Alzheimer's. Can you talk about, how this affects individuals, families,
Sure.
those types of things?
I think what I'll do, if it's all right, Pastor Scott, I'll start out with a little statistics just to show you how pervasive this disease is, because it's a terrible disease, and it affects 97%. I'll say 97% of the people over age 65 is who this disease really impacts. It's rare for somebody under the age of 65 to be inflicted by it, even though it builds up inside your body for years. It has to do with proteins and bacteria and how it impacts your brain. But worldwide, this disease impacts at any given time over 50 million people. That's just an amazing statistic that's out there. And what's really sad is there's no known cure right now for this disease. And right now it's doubling every 20 years. So it's a growing disease. I know we focus on COVID right now, but this disease is the 6th leading cause of death, not only in the United States, but in the world. And again, it's in the top 10 of all causes of death, but it's the only one in the top 10 where there's not a cure right now. So that makes it pretty tough out there when you know that, like Tom just talked about, this thing could go on for years. When you look at here in Loudon County, based on the American Alzheimer's Association estimates, there are over 3,600 people in Loudoun County alone that are impacted by Alzheimer's in one of the 5 stages of the disease that you could possibly have. And in the average time someone lives with this disease is anywhere from 8 to 20 years. And I met a guy the other day who runs a hospital in the area whose mother has lived for 20 years with this disease. She's now in a home. So that's pretty tough when you stop and think about that there's 3,600 people that could have the disease and another 3,600 that are impacted by the disease on a day-to-day basis, on a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week basis as you go through it. The unknown part of the disease is that about 25% of all caregivers will pass away before the person with the disease. And the reason for that is the amount of stress in having to deal with it on a day in and day out basis. And not only stress from caring from the individual, but the financial burden that goes along with this disease. There was an article published by the New York Times a couple of years ago that said the 5-year cost of this disease for one individual is $287,000. The American Alzheimer's Association has published that the lifetime cost for this disease is $342,000. So you can see how that financial burden will play on the individual that has this disease and the family and the caregiver that go along with it. And we will be, although there will be a fee attached to ours, we are by far going to be the cheapest alternative that's out there for someone with a disease. So having given you some statistics on the background, now I'm going to do like Tom did. Instead of Sue's story, I'm going to tell you a personal story that I lived through and didn't really think that much about it as I was going through it. But about 11 years ago, I met a guy who was here in Loudon visiting his parents. He was a concert pianist. He played in the Arizona Philharmonic. He traveled all over the world, and he wrote children's songs, children's music. Great guy who I got to know, really low-key type of person, really pleasant to be around. When he was in town visiting his parents, we became friends and he'd go hiking with us. Well, at age 52, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And keep in mind, this is an exception because only 3% of the population ever get it before the age of 65. And it immediately started to impact him. His wife left him, which was the biggest thing that happened for him. And then eventually he lost his driver's license, which meant he couldn't take care of himself, go to the grocery store, do things like that. So at age 54, his parents moved him into their house, and his parents were in their early 80s, and they became his day in and day out care providers. We, 2 other guys and myself, would pick him up every Monday to give them some respite, and we'd take him hiking with us up in the mountains. And we watched over the next 4 years the disease progress within him. And it got to the point where if we came across a limb hanging down over the trail, it became a major obstacle for him. It would stop him in his tracks. He couldn't figure out how to get around it. When we finished hiking, we always changed our shoes. He couldn't figure out how to get his shoes off, how to get his sneakers or other shoes on, get them tied, what shoe went on what foot. It became a major ordeal for him, to the point where we actually bought him a pair of sandals. And even that became a problem. And if we took him out to lunch, it was like you and I doing a crossword puzzle, and we get a question that we really don't know the answer to, and we're sitting there guessing to figure out how to make it in. Well, that's what the menu was for him. And then if you can imagine what his parents were going through, it's kind of like what Tom talked about with Sue. He'd leave the lights on at night. He'd leave the refrigerator door open. He'd have things cooking on the stove and walk away. And to the same thing Tom said, he would disappear in the middle of the night, and we would get a call, or his parents would go out and look for him and find him, just roaming and not knowing where he was. Well, he started to get very frustrated with the disease, and this mild guy became a little bit aggressive. So at age 58, they moved him into a nursing home. And when he got in there, he started to thrive because his long-term memory kicked in. He remembered music. He was playing the piano. He was, singing with the groups that were in there and stuff, and, had a smile on his face. But then COVID hit, and he had to be put into isolation because they could no longer gather in groups. And he just suffered from that. His parents couldn't go see him anymore. And he passed away last June at age 60. So, the disease is a tough one to deal with. And it's one that the poor caregiver, unless they have some kind of outlet, they're there or have to make arrangements for everything they want to do, because you can't really leave that person alone for themselves. And again, this is an exception, but it's a story that happens over and over. I have a neighbor right next door to me that's probably in stage 3 of Alzheimer's. And my wife and I will go over and help out every once in a while because he can't be left alone. He'll wander off and he'll do things. And she can't go anywhere because she's tied to the house and him and taking him to doctors and different therapies and things like that. So one of the things we've done is, if you go to our website, which is www.ourplacetn.org, is we've set up a tie-in to Facebook. So if you click on the Facebook icon, we're kind of using that as an educational website, and we're posting articles about Alzheimer's, the effects of it, what the most up-to-date science is, things you can do to help yourself, things you can do to help the caregiver. And as those articles come out, we're posting them on that website to help people. So, with that, I think that pretty much paints a picture for you of how it impacts the individual and the family.
Yeah. So, and I know we'll talk about this here in a second, but so what are some of the things that Our Place, once you're all up and running, in terms of helping the needs of the population who come, those who have Alzheimer's or dementia, and then their families? I mean, how will this what would they expect? How will this benefit them?
Tom, are you going to answer that?
I think to begin with, the facility is going to be located centrally in Loudon, Monroe County area, so people will have access to it. But what I liked was their actual mission statement, and that was to provide a program of activities to seniors with Alzheimer's dementia that will enrich their lives and allow free time for their caregivers. And I think, if I'm correct in this could serve up to 25 people a day, 5 days a week. And it would be providing activities that really do make a difference in slowing the progress. First of all, socialization is one of the big ones, but then providing them with stimulation, art, music, exercise, bringing in pets for therapy. Those kinds of things are really making an impact. And for each individual there'll also be volunteers working with them one-on-one. So it will not only give the caregiver a full break for the day from, I think, 8:30 or 9 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, but it really does slow the progress of the disease. Jim, you might want to talk about the facility itself.
Sure,
and the timeline.
I can do that now. The big thing, Pastor Scott, is that there's not, between diagnosis and the nursing home or long-term care facility here in Loudoun County, there's really not, or Monroe or Roane County or the surrounding communities, there's really no place for these people to go to get any help. The nearest facilities to us here are Cades, which is the Central Methodist Church in off of Kingston Pike on the other side of Pellissippi Parkway. And then there's a place called Keystone up in Oak Ridge, and both of those facilities are to capacity. Matter of fact, the Cades director has asked us if we could consider taking people out of Farragut, which, we'll have to see how it works, because like Tom said, this is our building. This is the architectural rendering of it. It's 2,200 square feet. If you notice this white area over here, thanks to the Eastern Tennessee Foundation and Tellico Community Foundation, who gave us the land, we will be able to expand and grow this facility to more than double its size if the need shows us that it's there for us. What it will house is 20 people a day, because that's all the state will allow us to have based on the square footage that's currently in the building. And the hours are pretty much up in the air. We're looking at right now, and Tom's not aware of this, but we're looking at 8:30 to 5 p.m. So we can accommodate the people that are working. But really, the hours will be dictated by the clients who we need to serve as we get closer to that time. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we get there. And like I said, based on the success of the program, we will be able to expand the building down the road if the need shows itself to do it. And I'm actually talking with people down in Monroe County who eventually would like to have their own adult day service down there. So we're going to kind of be the model for them, and we're making sure we document everything and put everything together so they can see it. So timeline. Tomorrow is an important day. Tomorrow we find out what the actual final cost for this building is going to be from the contractor we selected. We believe we have enough money put away to build the facility itself at this point. So we're planning on breaking ground on June 15th with a ceremony out on the site. The site itself, the building will be located on the corner of State Road 444 and State Road 72 in front of the Food Lion. Then based on that, the groundbreaking, we're hoping that in September, we'll hire the director and the program administrator, bring them on board. We're putting together a mentoring program for them with the other adult day centers to make sure we take the best of what's out there. And that's what we've been doing anyways. In November, we'll hire the staff, which will be 3 part-timers. And we'll get them, start training them. We'll also bring on board some volunteers who will work with the staff, with the clients at that point, because they'll need to be licensed and they'll need to go through the same testing that our staff will to be able to do that. And then we'll bring the rest of the volunteers on in January. We'll train them, and we're hoping to open our doors in February of next year. So things have happened rather quickly at this point. And, I can't thank the people who have been associated with us to help us get to this point and continue to move on, because we have basically all the handbooks written, all the programs and outline. We've started that, and we're really moving ahead pretty fast at this point.
Yeah, and I noticed I was recently, I guess last week, on your website, and you have a lot of community partners who are behind you and have already contributed to our place. And so that's good. It's a big project, and especially, and that was a question I was going to ask you. I just know anecdotally with increased costs of homes and these types of things being built, I was thinking that would, impact you guys too in terms of your total cost. And I did see even on your website, you have kind of a barometer of kind of where you're at, how much you've raised, and where you're at. So I also wanted to ask you, Tom, because I thought your story when we met before about how your church has really taken a leadership in this in terms of raising funds to make this happen. Can you tell that story about how your church and how you want to address this?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of people involved in the fundraising for this program, and ours is just a small part of it. But early on, we sat down and said, what contribution could we make as a small church to help this move along? And one of our members had mentioned the idea of a commemorative brick area around the facility. It might be a patio or a walkway where people could show their have a visual recognition of their support of our place. And so we came up with something called the Commemorative Brick Program. And that's where people can have a brick designed and printed with their maybe recognizing someone that has passed because of that, or just any message that they want to deliver saying, thank you, our place. And these bricks come in 2 forms. the bricks are all the same, but you can either have 3 lines of dialogue on them and some artwork, or you can just have the lines of copy itself. And we kicked that off in our congregation in September, and it was so successful. Our goal was to raise $100,000 towards the slightly over $1 million budget for the program. And to date, I think we're at $58,000 in brick sales. And that's where we came and hoped that we could get your congregation involved in. So what our plan is to have the order forms for the bricks at your location, so that folks can stop in, pick them up. They can fill them out right there or take them home. Make a check for $200 out to our place and return it back to you folks. And then you will, through us, would place the orders. What we've also found is that there are a lot of folks who have said, I'd like to make a larger commitment. On behalf of my mother or my aunt or whatever. And so there's another program that's becoming a part of this legacy program. And for those wishing to contribute more, we're going to have a legacy area that will have these wall plaques. And depending on the amount of the denomination, would determine the size of the plaque. But for those who want to make a bigger contribution to this effort, so that's kind of the program. And we thought it was successful enough with our congregation that if other congregations could be involved, there's no limit to what we could do. So we're hoping that you folks will have the same success that we have had, and we will make those packets available.
Yeah, and thanks, Tom. And we've talked about it amongst our leadership, and I think just even this week are making $1,000 donation into the legacy program, and we thought the best way to kind of get the word out in terms of even just communicating about this resource in our community and for people who would like to contribute. We're going to provide it 2 ways. The physical way, that if you'd like to make a donation and get a brick, or make a larger donation, you can pick up a packet physically at the church, in the church office during office hours. We're also in this video going to provide a link in the description, so that if you would rather just do that online, you can do that too. All the information, I found it really simple, just navigating your website. So we'll provide a link there if you would like to do that. And we talked even in our church, we know of about probably 14 or 15 individuals in our church that we know of are dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's. And as you said, thinking about 3,600, that's roughly about 8% of the population of Loudon County. And if you figure out just in terms of families impacted, that's a lot of people. So, I encourage you, if you're part of Central, if you would like to make a contribution like we have, we invite you to do that. Also, you did mention about volunteering, and there might be some folks who would like to do that. And I just wanted to see, what specific ways, or what type of things that you're looking for that would be helpful if you wanted to have some volunteers who wanted to get involved.
Well, first, Pastor Scott, we thank you and your church for your involvement and your donation to the project. We appreciate that very much. But we are looking for volunteers from a couple different standpoints. First, Tom talked about the brick programs that are out there. And of course, our website also has an activity calendar that you can look at, and it tells you what activities we're already involved with. But if anybody listening to this podcast has suggestions for us, groups we can speak to, or different organizations we can go out to, we'd be happy to do that to try and promote this for our community. But on our website, which again is www.ourplacetn.org, there's a tab at the top that says Get Involved. And if you click on that tab, it'll show you all the different opportunities that are out there for our place. And basically, you can break it down into 3 categories. The first category would be volunteers that we would train, that would work with the actual clients that are in the building while they're there. Then there would be volunteers that we would bring on board this fall to help us plan the programs that we will be administering in our place that would be beneficial for the clients of the program. And Tom listed a bunch of those before, but it's everything from pet therapy to art to music to physical exercise to helping us be the event coordinator and celebrate birthdays and national holidays, because stimulating and keeping things exciting are what's important for the people that are in there. We're also looking at some national programs that we want to fund for people that are in this program that will help them with stimulation, and they can help us administer those type of things. And then the third group of volunteers would be people that would assist us with the facility, both inside and out. So all those are listed on our website. Our website is very easy to use. Even the programs that we just talked about, there's banners when they flash on the home page. If you click on it, it'll save you the trouble of picking up a packet, because it walks you right through the steps for whatever you decide to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I did also your Facebook page. I did check that out in terms of finding additional articles to better understand, and I like, Tom, what you said earlier about taking your neighbors out for burgers and giving them kind of some respite, because that's why you do it, right? Is to love our neighbor as ourselves. So, well, I just want to thank you guys for this time, and I thank you for what you're doing in our community. And I just want to see if there's any final comments that you'd like to give to whoever's watching.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you for this time. And I'd like to thank those that are listening to us talk here today, and hope that they will find a way to help us and get involved in this program, and we can watch it grow and help those in our community. And I know, like myself, if you stop and really think about those people who are in your life that are impacted by this, I'm sure everybody out there probably knows at least somebody that's been a neighbor, a friend, a family member that's had this disease impact their lives. And that's what we're about. That's what we're here to help. And I just can't wait to get it open and start seeing as the fruits of our labor being carried out and helping those in our community that are in need. But really are appreciative of this time and you for helping us with this.
Absolutely.
I only had one other thing to comment on, and that was when I found out right from the beginning that there would be financial support for those in the community that weren't able to cover the daily cost of this. That's ingrained into the program, and I think that's so important. But we really do appreciate the time that you've given us, and we'll hope that people will want to visually show their commitment by ordering a brick. So thank you, Pastor.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing also I learned in talking to you gentlemen, when we did, was just in terms of the distance. I think that's helpful mentally for me, was just basically, if you're at our church, it's about 20 minutes away. So just in terms of accessibility, and there's not a lot of places that are that close. So anyway, well, thank you so much for your time, Jim and Tom, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing what God's going to do.
Thank you, Pastor.
All right.